Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd. Sometimes I call myself the infrastructure nerd. And today we are talking about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. It is my favorite thing to do, and it is the thing I probably get to do least often. We'll talk more about that in a second. We're talking today about document automation, specifically document automation using PracticeMaster. Now, before I get into any details here, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. And we'll point out that most of you, if not all of you, should have something that looks like this on your screen over on the right-hand side. Many of you may be familiar with how this works, so you may have pressed this little button that looks like arrows pointing to the right, and when you did that, this went away. This still shows, but this slipped out of the way. When you do that, that'll allow you to see everything that's underneath this. So if it's covering up part of my screen, you're going to want to slide it out of the way so that you can see what's going on. When you do slide it out of the way, this button turns into a button with arrows pointing to the left, and pressing it again will cause this to slide back out. Now, there are two ways that you can ask questions. One would be to raise your hand by pressing this button that looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upwards in front of it. That means raise my hand. When you do that, Leanne, our humble moderator, will recognize you, unmute you, let you ask your question, make sure it gets answered, and then we'll mute you back up so that if you're eating lunch this early, you can continue to chew. Now, the other way to ask questions is for those who are shy, which not many people that I know in working in law offices are shy. But if you're shy, you can also type a question here. And when you submit the question, it will show up in front of Leanne, and she will ask it for you. So without any further ado, let's talk about document assembly. Now, we call it document assembly sometimes, we call it document automation. It's probably most commonly confused with document management. This is not how to manage the documents that you produce in the law firm, but instead how to produce them automatically, hence the term document automation. It's been there since the very beginning of CaseMaster, which is what it was called before it was called PracticeMaster. In the very beginning, it only worked with hot docs. We're going to talk about hot docs in a minute because hot docs adds an incredible amount of power to the PracticeMaster system. But now it also can work without hot docs. There are a lot of reasons that you may want to look into getting hot docs, but PracticeMaster can also assemble documents without the aid of hot docs. Now, to qualify, PracticeMaster can do this document assembly or document automation on its own if you are using Word. If you're using Word Perfect, you do need to have hot docs no matter what. Whether or not you need any of the advanced features, it is the only way to generate documents from PracticeMaster into Word Perfect. If you're using Word, you can generate these documents straight into Word. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. Now, I call this the last frontier, and that is the reason that I get to do this far less than I would hope to because, as I said, it's my favorite thing to do. I love automating documents. It's very challenging. But it is usually the last thing that a firm does when they put in PracticeMaster. Most of you are here because you have PracticeMaster, and you know that there are a lot of things that PracticeMaster does. And document automation is it's kind of funny because it's the biggest time saver, it's the biggest money saver, it's the biggest efficiency driver, and it's also the last thing that everybody does, because it's also a little bit more difficult to get started than any of the other things that you might be doing in PracticeMaster. Now, we know how, most of us, so for those that don't, I'll go into it a little. We know how the data is set up in PracticeMaster. I am looking at a PracticeMaster system that is for a very new firm because it only has one client with one matter. Most of you, of course, have thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of matters, and they all show up over here when you're in the list view of the client screen. Information is stored in PracticeMaster in such a way that it is relevant to the type of law that the case falls into. So we have our journal records and emails that we've tagged to the system. We don't have any here because this is a sample system for document coding. Fees and costs, and all the information about a matter, the logistical information. One of the things that we do, some of you may not have this, some of you may have put in Practice Master yourselves. One of the things we tend to do, especially recently, is put in a People tab where you can take the people that are associated with each matter and tag them to that matter and identify what role they take there. So document automation, quite simply, is taking this data and putting it into a document. Now that sounds pretty simple. And it can be, especially once those documents are automated. The hard part is getting them automated, but we have clients that do that themselves, and we have a lot of clients that have us help them to do that. Now, here, just to give you a quick example, I'm going to go over to Quick Clicks. I'm going to get back over to the list screen or the billing screen, and when I do, Quick Clicks will give me an option for Word document assembly, and that means I'm going to assemble a document for this particular matter. First one I'm going to show you is a sample jury demand. We simply click on it. We've already pulled up the client that we want to assemble it for. We're going to say, yes, we want to show assembly. All this blue stuff here is the document coding. And bam, we're done. Now, what it did was it took all these details. The plaintiff, the defendant, the cause number, the defendants are listed again because in this particular example it's a defense firm. The name of the firm, the name of the attorneys that are working on the matter, all the certificate of service information. Now, one thing to point out is we are here in Word. We get dumped into Word where we can do whatever we want to finish this document. Document automation does not always do everything. Most of the time it does, but there's usually at least a little bit of formatting. For instance, we've coded it so that the certificate of service could fit on one page, but if it doesn't, all we do is come here, hit hard page, and bam, the certificate of service lines up the way it's supposed to. Now, all of these details, these are the five of the people that are listed in the People tab. Their address, their name, what relationship they have to the case for the certificate of service, the names of the attorneys that are representing the client, the names of the defendants, the names of the plaintiffs and the defendants up here, the cause number. These are all details that are stored back here in Practice Master. And we merely took these details and pulled them into a document. Now, one of the first things I get from people when I show them this is, well, we're not a litigation firm. Well, okay, so I used a litigation document. We'll show you a couple other documents in a minute. And, of course, one of them is going to be our master letter form. It's obviously not a litigation document. We have firms using this capability in all areas of law. A big one, litigation certainly. Another big one, estate planning. We have firms that do foreclosure or landlord-tenant work with evictions and that sort of thing. Very, very well suited to document automation. I can't really think of any area of practice that wouldn't benefit from some level of document automation. Now, to illustrate that, let me show you our standard letter. Now, this standard letter is something that we will drop into any client that wants it pretty much virtually free of charge. We do have to make a few tweaks here and there, but I'll tell you that developing this took about 15 to 20 hours, maybe even a little bit longer. We got real into making it work exactly perfectly for virtually every situation that a firm might throw at us. Multiple tos, multiple froms. If you're in like a litigation type firm and you're writing to, especially if you're an insurance defense firm, when you're writing to an adjuster, you list the claim number, but when you're not, you don't list the claim number in the reline. All of these things have been taken into account. So this is our letter document that we will throw. Now I'm going to use an example of an e-letter, and it's going to be for one of our clients. So you're going to see that we're doing some work for a firm called Lewis Wagner. And the reason I show you the e-letter, hold on one second. The reason I show you the e-letter is because it makes it clear that it is a letter, because you're getting the letterhead in the background. I've chosen the wrong one, and I've chosen one that doesn't work very well because it was one that we were using to test some things. So let me try this again. Quick clicks, Word document assembly. One thing that you really want to make sure you do in your coding documents is that you get all the junk out of there. As you can see, we have a lot of junk in here. So here's the e-letter final. And what it does is it looks at that people file and says, okay, who are you writing this letter from? And I'm going to say Robert Fussball, who's an attorney at our fake firm. And who are you writing it to? And I'm going to say, oh, let's write it to me, even though in this example I'm co-counsel. And then it's going to want to know who you might be carbon copying. So I'm going to say, well, let's carbon copy the claim rep, because that'll show you what I'm talking about with including the claim number. And who are you BCCing? And I'm going to say we're BCCing Jim Jones, the client. Now keep in mind, we can select in document assembly multiple things. As I said, we wrote this letter. We spent a long time making this document capable of writing to multiple people or from multiple people or CCing multiple people or BCCing multiple people. So keep that in mind. When you see me double click on something here, I can also choose from the list over there. And here we have the assembled document. Now I had Leanne help me and throw a couple extra hard returns into this document just so you'd be able to see that when we're doing an e-letter type situation, we of course code it to have a separate second page as opposed to the first page. And of course you also, we have a letter document that's designed to work on your pre-printed letterhead also. So this is something, anybody that is attending this or listening to it in a recorded version, if you'll just shoot me an email if you'd like for us to send this document to you, we'll help you get it installed and tweaked with a minimum amount of time that we'd be billing for, or if you prefer to play with it yourself, we're happy to just send it to you, and you can let us know if you need help after you've done that. So, of course, we won't be sending you one with Louis Wagner's letterhead in the back, but if you are using your own e-letter, then you can pull your logo in there. Now, what we've got here is a situation where, of course, we've started a letter. We've got the date. Since we chose the e-letter, we've got this sort of electronic transmission notice. We've got the name and address of the, in this instance, the single recipient of the e-letter. And of course, writing to multiple recipients is different than CCing and BCCing people down at the bottom, as you may know if you've ever done it. Reline, this is what our default letter comes out with. You can put anything you want in here. We're going to take a look at how this coding looks in just a second. But we will tend to put the caption, the cause number, the file number. When we're writing to the court, particularly, we have this cause number in there. We've done it a couple times where when we're not writing to the court, we don't have the cause number. Very simple fix based on the way we've coded the document. And as I mentioned, if we had been writing to a claim rep, we'd have the claim number here. Here's a salutation. It's signed by the person that I told you was writing the letter with the appropriate initials of both the letter writer and the letter preparer. We have the CCCs, and since Thomas Shaw is a claim rep, we also, the system was coded, their letter was coded to pull that claim number in, and we're BCCing Jim Jones. Tommy Shaw, I think he's an old rock and roll star. Jim Jones, we have a little trouble coming up with sample data. Me. But nonetheless, this is our standard letter. Now, many firms have lots of form letters, and you can take this standard letter, make copies of it, insert the, change the name to appropriately represent what the letter is being used for, and insert the standard text into the letter, and bam, you've got a letter. You also, of course, many firms use this as a starting point for any letter that goes out because it's pulling its data from PracticeMaster. If somebody changes Paul Perdue's address in the contact file and now we go 2 days later to write a letter to him because he happens to be tied to this matter, that new address is going to come in here. If we have a change to anything in the system, it's going to be reflected here. And of course, as you saw, it takes about 10-15 seconds to assemble a letter this way. No cutting, no pasting, no pulling up a document, no chance of having it, data that's left over from an old letter that we may have pulled up stay there and not have somebody forget to take it out. Now, keep in mind, this is a very simple example. The other example was relatively simple. We have firms doing all sorts of complex documents. I have foreclosure firms that do the entire foreclosure package through document assembly, document automation. In a minute, I'm going to show you a PDF form created through HotDocs that is just an example of doing all the documents that the court would require. In this example, it's in Michigan because they're all PDF forms. And I know a lot of other states are doing this too for an eviction. And you can literally infrastructurize a practice and make the preparation of all the documents that might have taken half hour, couple hours in the past, literally take seconds or minutes to prepare. Now let's take a quick look. I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't have time and it is a very complex subject, but we'll talk about it. Let's take a look at this document. I'm going to open up this eLetter Final, and I'm going to open the actual template file. And what I did was I right-clicked and chose Open instead of actually double-clicking on it to assemble it. This is the code that helps us to write this letter. Now, I know it looks complex, but it really isn't when you get right down to it. Now, I know some of the people that are attending, I've looked at the list, some of you are kind of nerdy. You're the ones that are going to take to this. Some of you may not be. Either you have somebody in your office who's nerdy, or you can get help from us or somebody like us to do this. But just so you know, for those of you who are nerdy and are curious, this is a single command. It happens to be a variable, and it happens to be pulling the contact name from whatever record we're talking about in the people file. Here is another variable, and it happens to be pulling the organization. Here's the address line 1, 2, and 3. Here's the city, state, and zip, and although you see them on separate lines, that's only because they are wrapping. When these actual fields are inserted that aren't nearly as long as these variables, everything tightens up to have the city, state, and zip on the same line. We do have some logic here. We'll see if statements. We'll see file opens and file closes. We'll see the ability for people to select the to select the from, to select the BCC and the CC. Those are all these if and file select and file open and file close commands. Okay? Now, again, I'm not going to go into, my point here is not to teach people how to document code. We can do that if you want. There is a lot of good resource material from STI. The manual in its PDF form has quite a few sections and chapters on this. There are a lot of resources for you to do this. But I just wanted to give you a flavor, a little bit of feel for what it looks like. Now, one other thing that I'd like to talk about is HotDocs. HotDocs brings some functionality to the document automation processes within PracticeMaster that don't already exist within PracticeMaster. A big one, a number one reason that a firm will choose HotDocs over just using PracticeMaster is PDF forms. If I go into this matter, and I'm actually going to back out of here. I'm going to back out of this PracticeMaster. I'm going to go into a separate sample system that we have. It's actually a form we developed for another client. These two documents were for one client. This form was for another client that does evictions in Michigan. And I'm going to open up their case, their sample case, Jim Jones. Jim Jones shows up all over the place. And I am going to do a HotDocs document assembly. And what I'm going to do is a dismissal for an eviction. So I'm going to click on that. I've already highlighted Jim Jones's case. Keep in mind, of course, you would have to select the case you want to work on first. I'm going to go PracticeMaster up here, and then assemble document, and bam, there it is. This form, in that split second, was assembled as a PDF. This is a PDF fill in the blank form that was procured from the court. It's an SCAO form, which is what we call the forms in Michigan. Maybe they're called that in other states, but I know that in Michigan we use SCAO-approved forms for virtually everything that's filed with the court, and they're basically fill-in-the-blank PDF forms. And what just happened when I clicked on Assemble was this. It took the names and addresses and put them in the appropriate places. It chose the court based on the data that was in PracticeMaster. It chose the case number and the name of the defendant or plaintiff or whatever it is that this form is for. I think this is an eviction form, so it's a plaintiff. And that's it. It assembled it. Now, HotDocs does have some other functionality that is also very appropriate in certain situations. HotDocs has the ability to ask questions in a much more fluid and conversational way than PracticeMaster does. HotDocs has some logic built into it that PracticeMaster does not. HotDocs has the ability to handle pronouns and gender and those sorts of things, plurality and singularity, much easier than PracticeMaster. Now, PracticeMaster can do all these things. I don't know if you noticed it, but at the very beginning of that caption, or at the very beginning of that jury demand that I assembled, it said, "Now come, Paul Perdue and Bill Perdue, comma, defendants." If we had a singular situation, it would have been, "Now comes Paul Perdue, defendant." And that document was assembled in PracticeMaster, and I can assure you I didn't show it, but if it had been a single defendant, it would have had the right verbiage and the right plurality at the end of the word defendant. So PracticeMaster can do that, but it takes a bit more nerdiness to make it happen. Now, we're nerds here, so we kind of enjoy it. If you are in a firm with a focus, an area of practice that demands it, that has a lot of gender manipulation. Let's take estate planning, for instance, and don't ask me why, but I've noticed that when you're planning an estate, you're very careful to refer to people as him or her, or he or she, male or female, but once the person's dead and we're probating the estate, they're just them. I think that's a little funny. I guess when they're living, we want to refer to them by the proper gender. So gender specificity, is that a word that I just made up? Gender specificity is very important in estate planning documents, and therefore HotDocs may be a much better solution for an estate planning firm than just doing it for PracticeMaster. Now, HotDocs costs a certain amount of money more. The developer's license is, I want to say, $800, and the individual user licenses for people that are assembling documents is somewhere in the neighborhood of $350. But if you have a need for it, either with PDFs or with gender manipulation or with complex documents that have a need for a better conversational dialogue in assembling the document, you will more than save that amount of money in how much less time it takes, either our time that you're paying for or your own time, which you're also paying for, to create that document infrastructure. So that's document automation in a nutshell. We have two ways to do it. We have the ability to do it directly through Word from PracticeMaster and with HotDocs intervening. We can do virtually anything. Now, of course, it has to do with how your data is set up, but there may be some tweaks that you make to your data when you discover that you're going to start coding documents, usually very minor, but you can do, if your data is set up properly, virtually anything. I have not encountered a document that I could not code using either PracticeMaster Direct to Word or PracticeMaster to Word or or WordPerfect with hot docs in the middle. If you are doing PDFs, if you are doing more complex documents, specifically those with gender manipulation and pronoun manipulation and plurality and singularity, hot docs, even if you're not doing the PDFs, hot docs is still going to make that much easier. So in summary, that is document automation. Leanne, do we have any questions?
No, we do not, Paul.
Okay, very good. I can be reached at paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com, and that's Purdue like the school, not the chicken, and Attorney Computer Systems with plurality .com. Leanne, I think, has one question.
Oh, well, this might be a statement, but it's this is fabulous. Are there classes to create document assembly templates?
That's a very good question.
Well, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
For WordPerfect available.
Okay.
Where do I begin? We already have merge forms ready to go.
Okay. We tend not to offer classes for this, but instead individualized training, because if we were to try to cover everything we'd need to cover in a class, it's usually way overkill for whatever situation we're encountering. It is much cheaper and more efficient to work one-on-one with somebody to help them learn how to code documents. So no, there are no classes, but yes, we have 3 people, Leanne, Mary Jo, and myself, who are ready and willing and excited to help you learn how to code documents. I don't know if Ellen from Lewis Wagner is attending this, but she is a testament to my excitedness in showing somebody else how to do this. I get so excited when somebody else is learning how to do this that I can barely contain myself. So yes, we are able to show you how to do it. We're able to do it for you. A lot of our clients have us do the document coding and document automation ourselves and not bother them with learning how to do it. I get excited when somebody wants to learn how to do it, because that means they're a fellow nerd like me. Any more questions, Leanne?
No more questions.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Be sure to email paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com if you do think of questions after the fact, or if you want us to email you the letter that we kind of give away to people as a way to get them into assembling documents. Thanks much. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.